In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing. A quote by Theodore Roosevelt. In life, we are all taught to do the right thing, even if it's unpopular. To keep your integrity is far greater than the admiration of people who follow the flock. Because after all, those who follow will never learn to lead. Sometimes doing the right thing can be hard and even complicated, whether it be a big or small situation. But what about the situations that call for the right thing to be done, where your choice alone will alter what the future holds? Situations like this next story. January 12th, 2001. The world would make way for Treja Kelley. She would be born into a family where she was the oldest of two other siblings. Around this time, I normally tell you the name of her parents and go more in depth about her personal life. But due to the nature of this story, we're going to keep a lot of things anonymous. You'll find out why later. However, I can say that Treja Kelley was raised in a household that believed in going to church. In fact, she was the daughter of a deacon. Treja would have her upbringing in the city of Chicago, located in Illinois. She's described as a person who was genuine, a very caring person. She was outgoing, outspoken. She's described as a person who literally always had a big smile on her face. Her bright personality would make way for a great social life. She was loved by all who had the privilege of encountering her teachers, her friends, her family. She was all around a stand-up person. Around the age of 15, Treja Kelley would experience a hardship. Around this time in her life, she would be living in the Back of Yards neighborhood located in Chicago, when in June of 2016, she would be on South Sagman Street, standing outside of her home with a few friends and one of her relatives. While they were there spending time with each other, time would quickly pass, and before you know it, it would be 10:30 p.m. But around this time, a silver Audi would pull up to that location. A man then proceeds to exit the vehicle, and then upon exiting, he begins to fire shots. Once the man completes this action, he returns to the silver Audi and then speeds away. But when the smoke clears, out of 7 individuals that were standing outside of that home, 2 were hit by bullets. One individual would sustain a major injury to his wrist, although it wasn't life-threatening, but one person would ultimately lose their life. 17-year-old Christopher Fields, who also happened to be the cousin of Treja Kelley, would be hit once inside of his back. Christopher Fields would be rushed to Stroger Hospital, where he would ultimately succumb to his injury. At this point in time, the police now have a homicide investigation on their hands. However, this one wouldn't be hard to solve because he hopped out of the car showing his face, and a couple of people in the crowd could identify him. The investigation would eventually lead the authorities to 26-year-old Deontay Davis, and upon further investigation, they would conclude that this shooting was most likely a gang retaliation. Before arriving on the scene and taking the life of 17-year-old Christopher Fields, 5 minutes prior, Deontay Davis would be spotted at a gas station. At this gas station, he would get out of the car and he would ask the working security guard what was his gang affiliation. Upon finding out that the security guard was in fact just an employee of the gas station, he robbed him. And then he hopped into his silver Audi and proceeded to head over to South Sagman Street where the shooting occurred. Proving that the robbery occurred prior to the shooting wouldn't be hard because this incident would just so happen to be captured on surveillance tape. However, proving that he murdered 17-year-old Christopher Fields was about to prove to be a stretch, because out of the 6 remaining victims on that evening, none of them were willing to come forward and testify inside of court. Out of fear of retaliation, everyone was hesitant. But out of the 6 people, it would be 15-year-old Treja Kelley who would find the courage to come forward. Although the shooting occurred in the year of 2016, it wouldn't be into the year of 2019 that Deontay Davis would have his day in court. And when his trial began, a now 18-year-old Treja Kelley would take the witness stand and help secure a conviction for the prosecution. Deontay Davis would ultimately be sentenced to 30 years for first-degree murder, plus another 15 for the aggravated robbery. Receiving justice for 17-year-old Christopher Fields would be a bittersweet moment, because although 18-year-old Treja Kelley had helped secure a conviction, she was also frightened, because now everyone knew that she testified against the killer. This now put her in fear that someone might retaliate against her. Around the time of Treja Kelley taking the witness stand, she would have a boyfriend, a loving boyfriend. She also had close friends, and they would often preach to her about being safe. But to make matters worse, Treja Kelley was not only fearing for her life, but another life, a life that was growing inside of her. At the time, she was actually pregnant and expecting a baby with a boyfriend. The days after her testimony would prove to be very excruciating. She worried a lot, but as the days began to turn into weeks, she began to become more comfortable. Although her safety was still top priority, she would often use rideshare apps to get her rides to work, and when she wasn't using an Uber or Lyft, her friends or her boyfriend was walking her to and from work. September 8th, 2019. It would be a normal day for Treja Kelley. She would get up and she would prepare herself for work. She would go to work around 3:30, in which her boyfriend would accompany her on that walk. She would work her shift, and by the end of her shift, her best friend would be there waiting on her in order to walk her home. Her friend had even brought them food to eat. She brought her a pink lemonade and 3 tacos. So they would leave her job at Fair Play Foods and begin their walk home. When they were about a half a block away from Treja's home, they would notice a guy staring at them wearing a light blue hoodie. The friend then testifies that the man looked at them, and then he looked away, and then he looked at them again. He didn't say anything. He then pulled out a firearm and began firing shots. When this incident happened, her best friend took off running, and she went to hide in some bushes. From her location, she couldn't see Treja Kelley. However, she did see the perpetrator, and from the looks of it, it looked like he was looking for her. He was going through trash cans and peeping around corners. But when he couldn't find her, he finally got inside of a car with another person, and then he drove off. While inside of the bushes, Treja Kelley's best friend would alert the authorities. But when the incident occurred, she was already on the phone with her boyfriend, and he heard the entire situation. He heard Treja Kelley scream his name. He also heard the shots, but then afterwards, it was complete silence. He then hangs up the phone and calls the authorities himself. Treja Kelley's best friend would remain inside of the bushes until the authorities and EMS showed up. At this point in time, she didn't know whether Treja Kelley had gotten away or whether she was injured. But after leaving her hiding spot, she would walk into the sidewalk, and there she would see 18-year-old Treja Kelley laying on the ground next to a spilled lemonade that she had brought for her. When EMS arrives on the scene, they would rush an injured 18-year-old Treja Kelley to the hospital. But once she was there, she would be pronounced dead. Sadly, she wouldn't make it through this altercation.
Friends say Treja Kelley was 18 years old, a good kid and a hard worker. Last night around 9, 18-year-old Treja Kelley left her job at Fairplay on Halstead for home.
I'm just lost for words. I'm just lost for words. I mean, it's just...
For Jamie Young, it's just tragic. Her co-worker and friend never made it home. Around 9:30, police say a man walked out of an alley in the 900 block of West 52nd Street. There was an argument that escalated quickly. Kelley was shot multiple times and died.
Whoever did it, I need them to come forward. Need to come forward because she didn't deserve this.
Young had worked with Kelley at Fairplay for the past 2 years.
Everybody here at Fairplay loved her.
She says Young had issues with some girls, but not much more than your average teenager would have.
She was very sweet. I mean, she was the nicest girl you can meet. She was like a daughter to me.
Chicago police right now are searching the area for any private video that may show exactly what happened. Right now, they just don't have a good description of the suspect.
The authorities now have another homicide investigation on their hands. But in this situation, the best friend did manage to get a look at the culprit. A good enough look to identify the perpetrator, if need be. But the friend didn't know who he was. The police would begin their investigation as normal. They would begin talking to friends and family and anyone who encountered her before her untimely death. However, the investigation wasn't leading them to anywhere. However, shortly after the incident occurred, a tip would come into the authorities that would lead them to 21-year-old Kavarian Rogers. The authorities would be tipped off that Kavarian Rogers was going around town bragging to his friends that he had received money for killing a girl. Upon receiving this tip, the authorities would locate the Facebook page of Kavarian Rogers. And once they find it, he was on the page wearing designer shoes, showing off cell phones, and flaunting $100 bills. With this tip, the authorities had enough probable cause to bring him in for an interview. So that's what they do. But when Kavarian Rogers shows up to the station, he's accompanied by a lawyer. Upon being questioned about the murder of 18-year-old Treja Kelley, they would deny all accusations. But in this situation, the lawyer wouldn't be enough to get him off, because on the night of the incident, as explained, she was with her best friend, and the best friend caught a glimpse of his face, and they were able to identify him as the shooter on that evening. On April 2nd of 2020, Kavarian Rogers would have his first day in court. It would be arraignment, where the judge would talk about a proposed bail. However, bail would be denied. And this was for good reason. Because to make matters worse, when Kavarian Rogers committed this act, he was already out on bond. In April of 2019, Kavarian Rogers would be arrested for attempted robbery, and he would be placed on a $50,000 bond, in which you only need 10%. His family was able to come up with the $5,000 to have him released. And less than 4 months later, after being released on bond, he would accept a $5,000 payment in order to take the life of 18-year-old Treja Kelley. He had watched her. He knew that she often walked home from work. And on that night of September 8th of 2019, he would approach Treja Kelley and he shot her 5 times, with the 3 of those being in the head area.
She was an expectant mother, gunned down after work, and now we know that the 18-year-old had testified at a murder trial 3 months ago. We spoke with her grandmother. She says this is her 3rd grandchild lost to gun violence.
My grandchildren are very dear to me, and I'm losing them. I don't understand why they can't stop these people from doing all this shooting or protect the kids some kind of way.
We have to acknowledge the fact that we have to all come together as one. My prayer is that you will put me out of a job. What does it mean for me to lose my job? Violence has stopped. People have stopped killing each other. It's when we get together and say enough is enough. When we get together and we say, let me save my brother because you saved my brother. Let me save your sister because you saved my sister. When we get together and we say enough is enough, it's time for us to what? Make change happen on this block. Anybody with me today? To say enough is enough. That this should be the last time that we are here talking about stop the violence. It ought to be the last time. But we cannot do it without you.
Kavarian Rogers would subsequently be sentenced to 50 years in prison for the murder of Treja Kelley. The story is all around a sad situation. She was taken off of this earth for merely doing the right thing. She merely witnessed her cousin lose his life, and she stood up for him. And in return, she received the same treatment. This was truly a senseless act. And for what? $5,000? What are you going to do with $5,000? It's mind-boggling. To be willing to sacrifice a life for that low amount of money shows who he was as a person. Rest in peace, Treja Kelley. Thank you for being a light for others.